Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you've joined us. You can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org, where a number of you are finding us from all over the world, so we welcome you. You can also find us on all the social media platforms, and there's so many great guests over the last couple of years that you really enjoyed. Goodlifetelevision.org, and we have the long form interviews, and we've broken them up into what we call power clips. So if you just want to see some of the gold from those interviews, you can find it there at goodlifetelevision.org. This program is brought to you by the Turner Foundation, which you can find at theturnerfoundation.com. So welcome. I'm really excited about my guest today. Ryan O'Quinn is with me. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dean. Glad to be here.
Ryan is an American film and television actor and producer. He's president of Damascus Road Productions, which is an LA-based film and television production company specializing in family content, which we're going to talk about. He's also had memorable roles in Third Rock from the Sun, Beverly Hills 90210, and so forth. So he's certainly had a distinguished career in acting and producing, and so we're glad to have him.
Thank you.
Where'd you start? Where'd you grow up?
It all started, how far did we go?
In the beginning.
In the beginning. I grew up in a tiny little coal mining town in southwest Virginia. I have to say it slowly so it doesn't confuse southern West Virginia with southwest Virginia. So near the Virginia-Tennessee border, a little tiny town called Grundy, Virginia, very small population. No, needless to say, I often have jokingly say Spielberg is not my surname, and I had no inroads to the entertainment industry whatsoever. Had I wanted to be a coal miner or an accountant like my mother, that would have been much easier, but I chose this weird profession wherein there was no precedent in my hometown for that. So from a tiny little coal mining town to undergrad at William & Mary in Virginia, and then a brief stint in the U.S. Senate in Washington, D.C., and then on the West Coast for 26 years now.
So you were like you were working in a staff in the United States Senate.
I did, yeah.
And then one day did you just say, I want to be an actor, I'm going to Hollywood? Is this
well,
like the Fonzie story from Happy Days?
I always, again, sort of half-jokingly say that my years of study have taught me that theater and politics are the exact same thing. So,
right, so that's a great point.
I think that's pretty accurate on a lot of fronts. But yeah, in order to appease both my parents and myself, I double majored in college in theater and government. So the plan was for me to go to law school, so I moved to Washington, D.C. With the plans of going to Georgetown Law School, and then I paused that and took a break in order to work in the U.S. Senate as a legislative staff assistant, and was working on health care and the crime bill, both of which were huge issues in the mid-'90s. And all the while, the writing was on the wall, because I was taking all of my vacation days and all my sick days, and I was going to do stand-up and improv and sketch comedy, and I had a talent agent in Richmond, Virginia, and I was doing commercials. So pretty much anything there was to do in and around where I was doing entertainment things. And so finally, at one opportune moment, I broke it to the chief of staff that I'm moving to Hollywood. And I'll never forget, Dean, his posture. He put his big old cowboy boots up on the desk, and he looked me down and up, and he said, "We'll be here when you get back." And I didn't know whether to smack him or kiss him. I didn't know if that was, he had zero confidence in me, or I would always have a job. I didn't know what that meant. But that was 26 years ago, and here we are.
Wow. Yeah. And what was the first thing you did when you got to Hollywood?
The first thing I did was enroll in an acting class, a graduate level acting program in Beverly Hills. And then I quickly started to figure out how to get an agent or a manager. Again, having no real idea how this business worked or what to do. I started doing showcases, and so I ended up getting a really great manager, a manager who eventually put me into got me an agent at William Morris. William Morris, Endeavor, along with CAA and ICM, are the three biggest talent agencies in the world. Prior to the William Morris and Endeavor merger, William Morris was, among the biggest agencies even then, and so I was repped by William Morris, and I slowly started getting acting roles, and I was so blessed. I mean, it was just, the Lord just, in the grand scheme, everything moved very quickly, in the sense that there's some staggering stats out there about how long it takes an actor to get a Screen Actors Guild card, for example. How much of a grind it is before you can actually get into the union for professional actors. And praise the Lord, I did it in about 6 months, just quickly moving, and one thing led to another, and so thankfully it was fairly quick. And then I started doing small roles. I often say small roles in big movies and big roles in small movies shortly after that.
Huh. Talk about your faith journey a little bit, and kind of, I mean, not to.
Sure.
You're probably not the majority of the Hollywood crowd.
Yep.
But certainly you're having an impact. But talk about your personal faith journey.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to ask me, first of all, I should say that at age 18 is when I accepted the Lord and made I often say a logical, sober, adult, rational decision to follow Jesus. If you had asked me prior to that if I were a Christian, honestly, I would have said yes, and it would have probably been for no other reason because I wasn't Jewish, I wasn't Muslim, I lived in the South, and my grandparents went to church, and I'm American, therefore I must be. You and I now know that as a cultural, that's what we call a cultural Christian, probably, just because we assume that because of our geography we must tick that box, if nothing else. But the truth of the matter was I didn't know the Lord, and I really, Henry Blackaby talks about when we're all faced with a coming to a crisis of belief, and I believe in our faith journey that at some point we all have to make that decision. It's not the religion of our parents or our grandparents. We all have that decision to make personally. And when I was 18, my mother had been diagnosed with breast cancer and was given 6 months to live, several years prior to that. And for the first time in my life, I was thinking through morality and mortality and all those big things that we all have to face at some point. And I really just honestly started asking those big questions. God, if you are real, reveal yourself to me. And the big what if questions. What if I were not born where I was? What if there were not a church on every corner where I lived? What would it look like? What if I lived in Africa and had maybe never heard the name of Jesus? What would that mean to eternal salvation? So all of those big questions that I wrestled with as an 18-year-old, the Lord just revealed himself to me, and I made a decision at that time to follow him. And it's an understatement to say that changed everything. I mean, it really did. I as a freshman in college, I learned what most believers probably learned by way of a flannel graph in Sunday school. I voraciously, for the first time, studied Moses and Noah and Adam and the biggies and the fathers of our faith for the first time, and really just dived into it. That was my first year of undergrad, and my second year I was a Bible study teacher for our campus ministry program, and so I was all in once it happened.
Wow. And what has that been like in the world that you live in Los Angeles and Hollywood and these circles?
Well, you're exactly right in that. In the words of my grandmother, when I talked to / convinced her that I needed to move to L.A., when the question comes down, why are you moving to the den of iniquity? That's what most people think of Southern California in general, no matter where you are in any other part of the country. So when I broke it down to her, I explained it this way. I said, that if there were anything else that I wanted to do, I would need to go somewhere else. If I wanted to do Broadway, I would need to be in New York City. If I wanted to pick oranges, I would need to move to Florida. If I wanted to be a coal miner, I would have to move to Pennsylvania or West Virginia. But because of what I want to do, the majority of that happens in one tiny little crazy county 3,000 miles away in Southern California. 95% of everything we see on television and in the movies originates, for better or worse, from that place. And so she and the rest of my family understood that, and I knew coming to LA that Hebrews talks about being surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. I knew full well that I was not going to stand on Hollywood Boulevard and pass out tracts with A-list celebrities, but what I did know, I had a really great mentor in my life, and she said to me, because I was toying at the time, Dean, with the idea of vocational ministry. I knew there was some semblance of a calling on my life in some way. I just didn't know what that would be and how that would manifest. And in my mind's eye, I thought if we worked for the Lord, that would mean some sort of vocational pastorate in some way. But she said to me something I'll never forget, and I think this is a great mandate for any believer. And she said, the last thing we need is a half-hearted pastor. What we really do need is a great fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And then she started listing truck driver,
Right.
school teacher,
Right.
banker, bus driver, actor she threw into the mix. And I thought, you know, our mission field is our own backyard,
Yeah,
no matter where we are.
that's right.
And I don't have to clock in or out at a church or stand behind the pulpit to proliferate the message of the gospel. In some cases, I may be standing in a green room with somebody who I've been doing shows with, you know, in a secular theater club for 3 or 4 years, and at some opportune moment they may say, which is a true story by the way, there's something different about you. What is that? And in that moment, I will have the opportunity to inject truth. And thankfully for you and me, our job is not to convert. That's the Holy Spirit's job. We just have to speak truth, and He's going to do what He's going to do. So
Right.
I've
That
had
is
many of those
fantastic.
opportunities in the last 26 years.
Have you?
Oh, sure, yeah.
What a wonderful testimony. Do you know Kirk Cameron?
I do. He's a neighbor, yeah.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay, because boy, you guys are a lot alike.
Oh,
At
well, I
least-
take that as a compliment.
Yeah, well, that's phenomenal. Talk about Damascus Road Productions and what your vision is. Before we get to your newest project, which I want to get to in a second,
Sure.
but talk about kind of what your vision was for Damascus Road.
Yeah, well, the name speaks volumes, of
Right.
course. Damascus Road in name has existed for a number of years. Shortly after I moved to LA, I acquired the name through the state of California and went through all the legal channels to officially grab onto that name. And at first, it was a loan out company for my acting business. It's not uncommon for actors to have a separate company that's a loan out company that production companies pay to, and then that company pays me. So I had sat on that name for a number of years, Damascus Road Productions, and then a film I was in 5 years ago came out called Believe, and Sony Pictures released it nationwide, and all of a sudden we found ourselves as a production entity. I was literally and figuratively the face of the production, certainly to the powers that be at Sony, and you know, was on the poster around the country. And all of a sudden, my production company needed to be listed somewhere. So I converted what had already existed in name to a production company, and then, as you probably know, in this business and any other, one press release, and in our industry, a Variety magazine article or a Deadline.com article that, you know, tells the entertainment industry that you have a production or you're getting ready to release a movie, then I often say every sycophant friend you've had since 3rd grade all of a sudden has a script. And my wife and I, who is way smarter than me, when you know, and knows way more about what and how to do things, quickly said we need to have a brick and mortar facility. I had access to an office at Sony Pictures that I rarely went to, and I live in the Calabasas section of LA County, and we found an office in Westlake Village, right on the Ventura County, LA County border, and so we opened up a brick and mortar production company facility, and we literally hung our shingle out, and it's been pretty incredible to say the least. You know, I will have opportunity, sometimes as short as an elevator ride, and sometimes as long as an interview like this, to explain the name to somebody. And sometimes I'll hand out that business card, and I'll get a funny look, and sometimes it's just a sentence, but at the very least I get a chance just to talk just quickly about Paul's journey and what that really means.
That's phenomenal.
And the premise behind the name sort of goes without saying, but our thought process at Damascus Road is we want the projects that we produce and distribute to have a transformative quality, knowing full well that, you know, honoring that tip of the hat from Saul to Paul. There was a transformation obviously that happened, and again, our projects we're sometimes loath to have a call to action or a conversion moment in the movie, but at the very least we want every one of our films to cause somebody to think. And we want people to ask that question, what is out there, and at the very least come to the realization that there's something bigger than me. So hopefully transformation takes place in the process.
That's fantastic. You've written these 2 books, which I was fascinated by. Well, and you've done a lot of different things, but with these YouTube videos and different things. But the parenting rules and the marriage rules. But parenting rules became an Amazon #1 bestseller in multiple categories. What was your thought process with these two books?
Yeah, well, everything came from real life, and as I mentioned, I was on the road doing stand-up comedy for years. I was on the road for 10 years doing large platform, primarily church events. So, you know, big youth conferences, statewide denominational youth gatherings, large contemporary Christian music festivals. I would be the MC and would be the constant, you know, that between bands, for example. So I was in front of a lot of crowds and was doing stand-up a lot of the time. So I started talking about my family and started doing social media posts about crazy things that happen in my house. I have 3 kids. Right now they're ages 9, 11, and 13. And you do the math, you know that at some point in our journey, I had 3 kids under 5, and our household was just pure chaos. Each of them are about 18 months apart, so Irish triplets,
Wow.
you know, sort of. So I just started talking about either from the stage or via Facebook or Instagram about my kids, and that got popular, and a publisher approached me and said, could you put that in book format? And like any good actor/liar, I said, sure, let me do that. And so it was really a shock when the first book, you know, was #1 in a bunch of categories, including comedy and religion and religious comedy, which I didn't know was a category, but parenting and a bunch of things. But that book did well, and then the publisher quickly wanted another book on marriage. And my wife will be the first to tell you that I said, okay, I'll do that one too. And I sat down and I wrote about 4 paragraphs, and I was done. I'm like, well, that's what I know about it. And she goes, no, you need another 17 chapters for these people. So this may be the first time I'm revealing this to the world, but the truth be told, my wife was like, okay, let me write this book and we'll slap your name on it. But here's what we know about marriage rules. But
got it.
That's how that happened.
Got it. So Parenting Rules and Marriage Rules are 2 books. Ryan O'Quinn, you can check those out. That's phenomenal. And then the Frozen video. So how many times? Let me just ask you this question, because I've got daughters. And how many times do you think you've seen Frozen?
Oh my gosh! Well, I can recite the whole thing from top to bottom. Okay, so we're into the tens of thousands, I'm sure.
I figured. Okay, I'm the same.
Yeah.
So when you did this video, Dad's response to Frozen, that went completely viral. You were tapping into the core of men all over the world. Yeah. Like me.
Absolutely. It was, again, from a place of truth. And I'll give you the real story of the impetus behind that. We have a small group that meets, just a bunch of guys, a bunch of dudes that sit around my fire pit, you know, every other week or so. And more often than not unlike just a guys group, we sit around and tell fish tales and, you know, golf lies and whatever, but eventually we'll get around to some real meaty stuff, and we honestly, all of us go to church together and we check in with each other, and, you know, how's the wife and kids, and let's really think through things and pray together. And again, you know, we're in the heart of the entertainment industry here, so all the guys that are in my Bible study are in, you know, there's a writer, there's an actor, there's a director, producer, and so one of us said at some opportune moment, you know what would be funny, ... and I feel like most great things happen when somebody says that sentence. You know what would be funny? So one of us said, you know what we should do? We should rewrite the lyrics to one of those songs. And I was singing those songs out loud in the shower. Like I just kind of wrote, you know, on repeat. That's just, you know, we were all, a few years ago, we all did the same thing. So we said, we should rewrite the lyrics to one of those songs and sing it from a dad's perspective, because we are I'm in the minivan, and I know every single line that's happening of all this entire movie and this song. So there's no recipe for viral, by the way. As you probably know, you can't set out to make a viral video. Viral just happens. And honestly, had you asked us, what is success, or what do you guys want out of this? It would have been, you know, sending it to a couple of buddies with the subject line, you got to see this, and probably 2,000 hits would have been amazing. It was Father's Day weekend. We shot it in March in my neighborhood in Calabasas, and we released it. We sat on it until Father's Day weekend. So we sat on it for about 3 or 4 months until June, and we released it on Father's Day weekend. And from Friday to Sunday, it received millions of hits. And on Monday morning, my very first call was from Fox and Friends, and they asked for the exclusive, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And I got a call from an email from a publication in Manila, Philippines, who wanted an exclusive story from us.
Oh my gosh.
It really just, I mean, the trajectory of what happened from there on, it led to, honestly, that was the catalyst that led to the books, and it led to a pilot for a television sitcom on the same name. Jerry Mathers played my dad in the
I read
pilot,
that.
and it was just crazy, just this viral video with a bunch of
Dads.
crazy, silly, crazy dads
That is
that
so great.
rearranged a Disney song. And we knew that we were onto something when when we got a call from Disney, sort of slapping our wrist, and we were on their radar all of a sudden, like
right.
a cease and desist from Disney. It wasn't, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to take down the biggest entertainment company in the world. We're just being ridiculous in our backyard.
That mouse has good lawyers.
Oh boy, and more than I do, more
Yeah.
more lawyers than I did. So we said, yes, sir,
Yes, sir.
and then they re-released it and promoted it. So that's what happened.
Wow. Okay, when this comes out, when people are watching this, they're going to have the opportunity to see Paul's Promise. I want to talk about Paul's Promise, and I just want to read this real quick. Set in the peak of the civil rights movement of the 1960s, Paul's Promise is the inspiring true story of Paul Holderfield, a bigoted firefighter turned pastor who started one of the first integrated churches in the American South. And Paul breaks free of racism and alcoholism, and it's, from what I've read, a great story. But
Yeah.
tell us about Paul's Promise.
It really is an incredible true story that my company had the opportunity to produce last year, and it's a true story, as I mentioned, that took place in the still taking place as we speak. There's a church in North Little Rock, Arkansas, called Friendly Chapel, and it was started by a man who, by his own admission, was bigoted, racist. In the mid 1960s, he was a firefighter for the North Little Rock Fire Department, and his mother prayed for him fervently. And she, from the time he was a tiny little boy, would take the whole family to church and would pray for him and would constantly say, Paul, you need to give your life to Jesus. He's got big plans for you. And Paul was, it just sort of water off a duck's back, as we say in the South. It just didn't stick for whatever reason. His best friend when he was little, he was a son of a sharecropper, Paul was, and his best friend was black, and he had a great rapport with his best friend. And as both boys grew older, they went their separate ways, and again, by Paul's own admission, he was wrapped up in a racist culture in the South, wherein, the height of the civil rights movement in the 60s, particularly in the South, black folks and white folks rarely were seen together, and oftentimes it was contentious when they were. And on his mother's deathbed, and it's what you see in the movie, is kind of his life leading up to Paul's own conversion. But on his mother's deathbed, basically, he promised her that he would look into this Jesus thing. Like he made a promise that he fulfilled to his mom and said, okay, for you, I'll give it a shot. And in true Jesus fashion, there was a radical transformation. I mean, and it's based on a book, and in his own book, he talks about one day he was drunk, and the next day he never touched another drop of alcohol. He never touched another cigarette or cigar, and it was a complete 180. For most of us, there's some semblance of a gradual transformation as we try to figure out this new life. But for Paul Holderfield, it was a 180. And among the things that he knew that he needed to make amends for in his life as a new follower of Jesus was to find his childhood best friend whom he had denied. Again, not unlike the Peter and Jesus story, there was a moment, we took a little creative license in the film when you see it, and we put it in a different setting. The true story is during the Little Rock Nine, they often call the Little Rock incident, or the Little Rock Nine, during the desegregation of schools in Little Rock, Paul and his firefighter friends were attending a rally, attending the protests, and his childhood friend, his black friend who he had not seen in years, walked up to him, and he was so excited to see Paul, his friend, at this rally, this protest, that he stuck his hand out to shake his hand and give him a big hug, and Paul stuck his hands in his back pocket and turned away and denied his best friend. And he said, that night I went home and cried myself to sleep. And I promised myself and the Lord and my wife that I would never let that happen again. When the Lord got hold of his life, he went back to the inner city of North Little Rock and started feeding people, started feeding kids, and essentially just loving on people. He knew that there was a need there, and he sort of by accident started a de facto soup kitchen where he just wanted to do whatever he could. His friends and many of his contemporaries said, don't go to that part of town. Surely you'll end up dead if you do. And he defied the recommendations and went down and started talking to people and loving on people and feeding people, and that evolved into a ministry, which evolved into a church. And he was the first to say, I'm not a pastor. I've never been to seminary. His wife would often say, you've never even read a book, much less write one, So he started Friendly Chapel, and he welcomed everybody. And it was very, as you know, very avant-garde in the late 1960s, especially in a southern city, to say everybody is welcome in this church, and everybody is welcome on the platform. And if you love Jesus, you can preach from this platform. And so he reconnected with his childhood best friend, and that church, Dean, still exists today. 50 plus years later, every member of his family are vocational pastors in some way in the church. His son, Paul Holderfield Jr., is the senior pastor of that church. He has another son who is a worship leader, and another son who's a youth leader there, and they have served millions and millions of meals since the 1960s, and the doors are wide open still today.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Isn't it powerful what one person,
right,
the Lord, in your words, the Lord getting a hold of somebody, what can happen?
It really did.
I mean, that's a great story. Paul's Promise, check it out. I'm going to check it out. That sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
Ryan, thanks for what you're doing and who you are, and it's great to meet you.
Truly my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming. We'll see you next time. This is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I encourage you to stay tuned for today's program. Dave Odell is with me. He's the athletic director at Westmont College. He's also an entrepreneur, a businessman, and he's just got a lot of great stories and thoughts to share. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Dave Odell is on The Good Life, coming up next. Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you joined us today. I have a special guest today. Dave Odell is with me. Dave is a friend. He's a business executive, entrepreneur, also an athletic director here in Santa Barbara, California at Westmont College. So he's an interesting, amazing guy. Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
So first of all, I'll say, so Dave's dad, Bill, was the head basketball coach at Azusa Pacific University for 16 years, coached for 39 years total. In his 16 years at Azusa Pacific, I think his winning percentage was 804 or something really high. So I want to start by apologizing because I heckled Bill a fair amount as a Westmont student. I mean, like a lot. So if Bill, if you're watching, I'm sorry. And on behalf of all Westmont students, the sit down Bill chant. So I just want to clear the air.
That's good.
I've been having that on my shoulders for a long time.
Yeah, as the Westmont athletic director, I appreciate that.
That wasn't the worst of our chants, actually. Like back in the day, like some of our chants were a little.
Yeah, couldn't get away with that.
Couldn't do that now.
No, we would have had to kick you out.
Right. I probably would have got tossed a few times. So Bill Odell's an amazing guy himself, and I actually wanted to start with that. Tell me about your father-son relationship with your dad.
Yeah, well, first off, just unconditional love.
Yeah.
That was the foundation for our relationship, and that I never doubted that for a moment. And he's an amazing human in that he is very, very consistent. He didn't have a ton of words, but when he spoke them, they were impactful. And then the greatest blessing really in my life is that I got to stand and sit by his side from the time I was 5 years old to the time I left for Westmont. I sat at the end of every bench for almost every game since I was 5 years old. I got to be essentially teammates with different set of guys every year in Long Beach, and learned a ton from that experience about life and about growing up in a very, very diverse area of Long Beach and different lifestyles and different ways people lived, and got to be there, got to ride the bus with the team.
Wow.
Got to sit in at the halftime talks for really 13 years.
Wow.
And so that has been so formative, was so formative for me.
I bet.
Yeah.
Was he at Milliken?
Long Beach Milliken, yes.
So he was there for like 20 years.
Yes.
Okay, so when you were,
Yeah.
and then after you left for Westmont, then he ended up going to Azusa.
Right.
Okay.
I think I was at Westmont. He was never at Westmont while I was at never at Azusa while I was at Westmont.
Okay.
I think 91 was his first year at Azusa. I graduated Westmont in 89.
Okay.
So I can remember I played my very last game at Westmont. We lost in the district tournament, and got a ride from an old friend, Garrett O'Hara, from our Westmont game, to the LA Sports Arena to watch my dad win the CIF championship.
Is that right?
Yeah. So
wow.
That was a special.
Did he have a preference? What did he like? I mean, I'm sure it's a hard question to answer, but was the high school coaching experience for him versus the college coaching experience? Did he have a preference in terms of the 20 years in high school or at Milken versus the 16 years at
Yeah,
Azusa?
I think it was, he and my mom treated that as their ministry, and really serving youth. And so obviously Milliken, being a public school, was very different in that what you could do. And then you go to Azusa at this Christian school, and it was very you could be very upfront about things and talk about things that way.
So it's very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
And I would say he has great relationships with athletes that he coached at both places. In fact, he just went to, last year, had a big gathering of a group of guys from the 70s at Milliken, and they met at a Laker game in a box, and it was just one of those things that when you're a retired coach, it was such a blessing for him.
Doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah. So, but the Azusa relationships, because you get 4 years with them, and you recruited them and all that, those relationships are more sort of, lifelong and more day-to-day like relationships that he still has.
That makes sense.
So.
And we were talking before we came on about Jeff Rudder, one of your dad's old assistants, who I know he's dear friends with. It was one of my high school teammates and good friends. So he was the athletic director at Azusa Pacific as well as the head coach. And
for a time, yes.
For a time.
Yeah.
And then you became the athletic director at Westmont.
Correct.
And as I was reading for this interview, I was kind of looking at his story and yours. His track record as a AD in terms of the whatever the award is for the
GSAC All Sports,
Sports, and then yours, which is no slouch. I think eight years in a row or something is what I read that you've won that award as AD.
Yes.
And I can't believe it's already been 11 years since you've been AD.
Yeah,
that's gone by quick.
Very quick.
Yeah. But so tell me about your dad, coach, AD. You were a player, you're a businessman, and we'll get to that in a minute, but tell me about what it's been like to be the athletic director at Westmont College, and also what is your vision for the student athlete there?
Right, that's a great question. So first, interesting quick story. So the reason I decided to do the AD thing is because I thought it was going to be a cool way to hang out with my dad, because he was still the AD at Azusa.
Oh, okay.
And so the first 3 years, or 2 or 3 years I was AD, he was still AD at APU.
Okay.
In fact, that award, the All Sports Award, has been in our family for something like 20 years, because he had it, and the first year he was gone, we won it. And so
that's
anyway,
amazing.
so we laugh about that.
That's
someday
fantastic.
Somebody will get it from us.
Is there a trophy?
Yeah, it's a really cool
Odells
trophy.
just own that trophy.
Yeah,
it
goes to each school, and it's funny because it has Azusa, and then it says Westmont.
Wow,
it's pretty cool.
That is awesome.
So anyway, so we had a blast being in these business meetings, for the conference together, and he taught me so much just to do that job. And so I was always able to bounce. And then when he retired, it was even better because I could bounce a lot of things off of him.
Oh, right.
Yeah, our vision for athletes at Westmont is that they have a life-changing experience through athletics. and we believe that, you know, all the pillars of Westmont, that, you know, this liberal arts education, where you've got to do all that, and there's no free ride for athletes at Westmont as it relates to academics, and you got to play a sport at a really high level and practice, and that time commitment, and you got to spend time to nurture your faith and all the things that Westmont brings in that regard. And so we see sort of the final product after 4 years as this super well-rounded person that's had some challenges, had some adversity, had to dig in and do a lot of things well, and we think that experience really has an impact on them, and you know that as much as anybody.
Yeah, well, it was a great experience for me. I was not a good baseball player, and it took up a lot of time, so I retired. but the Westmont experience is phenomenal. For people that don't know or are watching this somewhere else, Westmont College is a private Christian college in the hills of Santa Barbara, California. 1,200 or so students with an outstanding everything, in my opinion. And I'm not just saying that because Gail Beebe's going to be here in a couple weeks.
Oh, okay.
I mean it. It's an outstanding. And our family's been blessed by Westmont a lot. But you've won a lot. It's interesting in that answer, winning didn't come up, and I know you want to win, but the other stuff is more important. And so how have you managed to win so much?
Yeah. So we think that winning is a great metric for how we're doing. If we're doing things well, we're going to win games. One of the first things I did being a business guy is I created this giant spreadsheet, and I wanted to see what our win-losses were as an entire program, all sports. And when I became AD, we'd won 41% of our contests the previous year. We started instituting some changes, a wide range of changes. And
like what?
Well, we did a number of things. Initially there were some coaching changes right away. We instituted a captain's retreat where we sort of poured into the captains and helped them, do that job well.
Great idea.
So that was important. We started a tradition of an all-athlete meeting where we pulled all the athletes together. Every year we pick a verse of the year and a theme for the year around that we want the whole program to adopt as all 250 athletes, not just team by team.
Yeah, wow.
And we really talked a lot about each team supporting other teams. So we came up like with brother-sister teams. We did some things like that, and we got each team cheering for each other and feeling like part of something bigger than just their 12 guys on a basketball floor or 30 guys on a baseball field. That they actually could have an impact on how the school did in total. And so I told my coaches, I said, I don't care where the wins come from. They can come from women's soccer, men's basketball. I just want wins. And so if your program is going to get wins, that's showing me that the metric is right. And if you're doing it in the right way, of course.
Right.
So that first year we won 41%. The first year we won, like, we're right at where we were before. It was a rough first year. And then it just started creeping up. And so now it's interesting because we're always flirting around 75%.
Really?
Yeah. And the last probably 3-4 years we've been in the 75% range across all sports. Obviously you can't take into account track cross country because they don't do head-to-head stuff. But
you're pretty good in track country.
Yeah, but those are good too. So
yeah, Russell Smelly.
Yeah. So
wow.
So anyway, so that kind of focus on the full program versus these little siloed things.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think.
So you kind of viewed it as one collective program.
Yeah.
Not individual teams.
Correct.
That's really smart.
I think our coaches also appreciated that, and there's a great camaraderie within the staff.
Is there?
And they support each other. And now that we have some older coaches and some younger coaches, that relationship, those are really cool relationships that are developing. And
That's really good.
Yeah, so there's a lot of like informal mentoring that are going on right now in the program, so it's great.
And Dave Wolf still there?
Dave Wolf is still there and won a conference championship last year. And,
yeah. And how many, is he 32 years or something?
I think it's in that range. He and Smelly, I've lost count.
Smelly's, he might be in triple digits. I don't even know where
Exactly.
Smelly's. And you mentioned the name Russell Smelly to people. It's amazing.
Yeah.
What people just, the respect he's earned over time, and the impact he's had, and Dave Wolf and John Moore and of course Coach Ruiz has just taken the baseball program now and lit it on fire.
Yeah, that I tell a lot of people that Rob Ruiz, who was my first hire, made me look.
Was he
like,
really?
Yeah. He made me look like a genius because that
you got
program.
Him from Azusa, right?
Well, so that's the thing is all I did to get him was I picked up the phone and said, "Dad, I need a baseball coach," and he said, "I got a baseball coach for you."
That right?
Because he was the associate head coach at Azusa.
Oh, he wasn't the head coach. He was the associate head coach.
Yeah, under Paul Svagdis, who's still there.
Oh, okay. But your dad knew about him.
Well, yeah, because he worked under my dad. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So my dad said, "Yeah, Robert's ready for a head coaching job," and we had a full search, but he nailed it.
Yeah,
and
he was the one.
Yeah, he's the one, and he's really progressed. He's helping me with athletic administration. I really lean on him in the AD stuff. He handles a number of things that, given my roles, I can't get to,
right.
But he does it so well.
That's great. So you started 1 for 1 in the head coaching deal.
Yeah.
That's great. I also lit the baseball program on fire, literally.
You did?
Can I tell you a quick story?
Okay.
So we did this, we decided to go down to the baseball field at night and douse baseballs in gasoline, put them on the tee, and then hit them.
Okay.
Seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
Yes.
Well,
why wouldn't it be?
Right. So I was a freshman, again, freshman on the team, not a good player, no power at all fields, how I would describe my hitting. So I am in charge of the gas can, and somehow I got like way too close, and the fire went this way.
Uh-oh.
So we had like a big problem. Security arrives. We go bolting in like 6 different directions. I just remember jumping some fence like in the right field, down the right field line. So I lit the baseball program on fire also.
Yeah.
Like Robert.
You did.
Just in a different way.
That's great.
Yeah.
Who was
that was the
coach?
highlight of my baseball career that night.
Was Kirkgard your coach?
Kirkgard was my coach, the great John Kirkgard, who I'm still good friends with to this day.
He's a great guy.
Legendary, wonderful man.
He's been so supportive of Robert. I
Has
think
he?
that's had a huge impact on our program too.
Oh,
it's just
great.
the support that we still get from John. He's
That's-
so loved. And so when I was playing basketball at Westmont, all my buddies were baseball players who played for Kirkgard.
Oh, really?
So I went to every baseball game. So I love John.
Yeah,
too.
John Kirkgard's a great guy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about John Moore.
Okay.
John Moore retired, and he's finished as the head coach, and my understanding is he's moving kind of into an associate athletic director, or he may stick around in some capacity. But reflect on his career, and I know you guys have been friends a long time, and reflect on that.
So I actually grew up. I had seen John play high school, and at Los Alamitos.
Because your dad.
Well, yeah, because Los Alamitos, where John played, is actually really close to Milliken, and so so I had an occasion to see he and his brother Mike play in their years at Los Alamitos.
Oh, nice.
So,
I didn't know that.
And then I watched John play at Westmont. Because we used to go to the local Westmont games, and then John coached at Fresno when I played for Chet Kammer at Westmont, and so a lot of years with John, and I think there's a couple things that there's so many things, but there's a couple things that really stand out to me about John is just one, his relationship with the community, and I don't mean just the Westmont community. For one, he's loved by the professors, and he's a coach that just really embraced that faculty coach model, and really, I think, helped the athletic department and helped me as an AD in terms of credibility with the faculty, because there's always a little bit of tension between athletics and the faculty. And John, I think, was instrumental in sort of bridging that. Russell's another guy who fits in that category, but so I would say that. And then, you know, some of the things that, you know, really, I think Westmont stands where it does in this community in terms of the greater Santa Barbara community because of John's interaction with the community. And I don't know if you follow the Santa Barbara Athletic Roundtable, but John is, they always have John be the last guy to speak at that lunch during basketball season, and he goes every Monday, and he just represents the college so well in that environment. And like the you know, people just eat it up, but he also does a great job of sharing what's special about Westmont to the greater Santa Barbara community. And if I had to pick one thing that I just think, you know, will go beyond what he accomplished as a coach and what he accomplished with certain players and so forth, it would be that he really did sort of help Westmont. I mean, when you think about it, he outlived a lot of presidents at Westmont. And so his name and face in the community was the Westmont coach. And so what a great ambassador he was for all these years in that regard.
So true. So true. He was here a few weeks ago. We had a great time reflecting and talking about.
I loved that episode because I loved when you threw out names and he was coming up with each one. That was good.
And then the Jeff Azen, I mean, he almost brought me to tears. I mean, I'm just talking about A's. I mean, 26 years together. And just that story. That's just such a powerful story of, you know, on Azen's part of kind of just servant's heart. And just the way that they, you know, love each other. It's powerful. Well, so that's all on the Westmont athletic director side. I want to talk about your career. I want to talk about, well, let's start with MedBridge. And when I was, you know, here years and years ago, it was always Dave Odell was associated with the Tynan Group. That was the name in my head. And now it's MedBridge. But tell us, I read a little bit about MedBridge, but for somebody who's watching, what does MedBridge do?
So what we do is we partner with surgeons, physicians that specialize in surgery, and we develop and then partner with and develop and manage outpatient surgery centers. So imagine a doctor, you know, needing to do your ACL reconstruction because you blew out your knee playing basketball. Most of my centers are orthopedic in nature. So my partners are mostly orthopedic surgeons. You've probably heard of Dr. Ryu locally, is a well-known surgeon. So I did my first surgery center in Santa Barbara at called Summit Surgery Center, right across the street from the hospital. And we did it because the doctors wanted to specialize their surgical environment. And instead of going to the hospital where you've got all different kinds of specialties going on, and you might be doing a hernia repair at 8 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock an ACL, and at 10 o'clock some heart procedure. They wanted to be able to specialize, and they wanted to be able to buy the highest tech equipment. They wanted their staff in the operating room, the tech, the circulating nurses, to be specialized in what they did. So it was, at the time, this was, you know, late 90s, there were only 400 surgery centers in America, and now there are 5,000.
Is that right?
And in fact, Medicare has really leaned on the surgery center industry to reduce the costs in the Medicare system. So in fact, over the last couple of years, we're now doing total joints in an outpatient setting for Medicare patients. And we've played an instrumental role during the pandemic because, you know, surgeries haven't been able to get done in the hospital because they've been saving beds. So we've actually been taking on more cases at the surgery center. And so my company, MedBridge, we put together the doctors who partner together. we develop the surgery centers, and then we hire the staff and we manage it. So we do all the business function, all the billing and the collections and all the Medicare certification, all the state and federal guidelines following, and then the surgeons just schedule their cases and they do their surgery. And
wow.
From a business model standpoint, we get a facility fee just like the hospital would get a fee.
Yep.
And it's an opportunity for the doctors to make a little more money because they're partners in the entity. So the
doctors who work there are partners in the business.
Exactly.
That is the surgery center.
Exactly. So instead of
wow.
just making their professional fee,
right.
they get a little cut of the profit of the surgery center.
Wow.
And so it's really interesting because as reimbursements have dropped, meaning doctors are getting paid less now
yep.
than they ever have,
yep.
they are really relying on these ancillary revenues like outpatient surgery. So
wow.
Anyways, the other cool thing about it is, Dr. Ryu's a great example. He used to say, you know, I would get done with my operative day at 8 o'clock and be happy if I got home to see my kids because of the backups that happen in a hospital with triage cases that need to get put on. And once we opened the surgery center, he was done by 2 every day. And
wow.
it allowed him to have a little more balance in his life, you know,
yeah.
and
wow.
all that. So
interesting.
So that's the business. We have 15 different surgery centers that we are partners in or provide services to across California.
But they're not called MedBridge.
They're all named separate entities.
Okay.
They all have different ownerships. We're the sort of the operating group.
I see.
And we're owners in most of them. And so yeah, it's an interesting business and one that I've sort of stumbled into.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did that happen?
Well, so I'm a CPA by trade,
right.
So I had gone that route, and you know about switching careers.
Yeah, I do.
You know, I did love it, and John Tynan, my current partner, asked me to come help him with Tynan Group, which he had just started.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we did was we bought a building by the hospital just as an investment, and it happened to be occupied by a number of orthopedic surgeons. And so I was their landlord, and they came and they said, "We'd love for you to build us a surgery center." And I said, "What's that?"
Right.
And they explained it to me. I said, "Okay, let's try it." And so I did one, and I thought, "Okay, we'll just go back to our knitting." And then about a year and a half later, I got a call from a very prominent Bay Area surgeon named Eugene Wolf, who actually was probably the first. He's sort of known for a particular knee and shoulder procedure. Asked me to develop his surgery center, and then it kind of just snowballed from there.
Wow, and you have 15 now.
Yeah.
And they're all in California?
They're all in California. We have one that we're working on out of state right now, but really focused on California, just because I never wanted to have to take 2 planes to get anywhere.
Right, yeah, right.
So we have a Bay Area presence, but pretty much everything is down here. We have
here.
3 in the
That
Bay.
is really interesting. I've been thinking a lot about culture, just in companies and anywhere.
Yeah.
What have you learned? You've been in business a long time. You've been an athletic director a long time now. What have you learned about culture in a workplace that is important to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that I think what employees expect from a culture, from a company, is very different today than it even was 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we're constantly sort of evolving
mm-hmm.
as it relates to culture. I think that one thing that is for sure, and I think long-term wise, is I've tried to build culture around service. Mm-hmm. Everything that I've been involved with professionally has been about making the people that we serve better and able to focus on their trade, whether it be Dr. Marcus Elliott at P3,
mm-hmm.
Helping him be able to spend more time in the science of sports,
mm-hmm.
helping Dr. Ryu be able to spend more time in surgery where
mm-hmm.
he really is helping patients versus administrative
right.
things, whether it's keeping my coaches with their athletes and on the floor coaching them versus having to do other administrative tasks that, so I've sort of built the focus of my cultures around service.
Yeah.
And, but I think that the big thing that needs to happen in culture, whether it be an athletic program or a business, is creating meaning around what mission is and what each person that shows up, how what they're doing helps others, changes the world, changes their community. It gives them something more than, am I just doing this for a paycheck?
Right.
Or if I'm just doing this for another trophy? More around like what am I doing for humanity or the kingdom or what have you.
Dave, thanks for coming by. I'm sure we'll have you on again
Thanks, Dean.
sometime down the road.
This has been great.
Great talking with you.
Good
and we'll see you next time. This is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. What is Good Life TV, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. Good Life TV exists to inspire, empower, educate, and encourage. Those are the things we want to do in a rough year that we're having. We want to encourage you. We want to inspire you. We're telling stories. They're real life stories. They're not all celebrities. They're people from all walks of life. And I think you're really going to be encouraged. There's a bunch of them at goodlifetelevision.org. So go there today, goodlifetelevision.org. Get encouraged. We love you. God bless you.